Okay, folks, we're going to start in just a moment if you want to find your seats.
All right. I'm going to say a quick introduction, and then Council's going to do something that it rarely does. We're going to leave all of you here in the very capable hands of the consulting team that was obviously engaged to support us from the beginning with this process. So before you have John Matheson, who's a principal and one of the founders of Strategy Corp, which is a very well-established consulting firm with decades and decades of municipal experience. And we also have Rima Bazi. And Rima, you may have crossed her path because she's done a lot of the stakeholder engagement and community advisory groups and on it goes. So I think Rima's gotten a very, very, very good sense of North Grenville and what we have to offer and what our challenges are. So they'll be taking you through the process tonight. Just two quick things. We are live streaming this, so if you have anyone at home who wants to watch it, please encourage them to either stream it on the municipality's Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and it can be watched later. I know the breakout groups aren't mic'd, so you won't have the benefit of those, but anything that comes from the front of the room is perfectly audible, and it's also being obviously it's also on camera, so anybody can have the benefit of trying to connect in either this evening or later. The other thing is as I think some of you know, we've been running a community strategic planning survey. The response has been amazing, over 1,900 responses. We set the bar at 2,000. We thought if we can get 2,000 people to register for participation and knock it out of the park, we can certainly get 2,000 people to give us the benefit of their thoughts, certainly through a survey, and obviously more if you wished to be here this evening or provide some other input. So we're at 1,900, so please encourage friends, families, neighbors, what have you, colleagues to do the survey so we can cross that 2,000 mark. And then finally, this is North Grenville's 5-year community strategic planning process. Certainly, I think Council is acutely aware that really, in essence, we're not just talking about 5 years. Anytime you go down a road, you often continue to do so, and it's hard to detour. So all of the things that have come up very recently and not so recently are certainly on the table, whether it's obviously the somewhat surprise news to all of us that we are getting a correctional facility, high rates of growth, recreational amenities, whatever it is. I know that John and Rima are here to make sure that what you have to say is well captured and will be reflected back to Council. And finally, Council will get a draft community strategic plan, I think sometime in October. And at that point, it will be then shopped back out to the community to see if we've hit all the right notes. Did John and Rima make sure that they defined our challenges and our opportunities in ways that resonate with the community? And at some point later this fall or early winter, we will adopt the plan. And then the municipality will have an opportunity to think really creatively about how they implement that plan. So thank you all for being here. I'll turn it over to John and Rima, and good luck with your efforts, and Council's here anytime. And I should recognize, I apologize, we have Councillor John Barkley in the room, Councillor Kristen Strachan, Deputy Mayor Jim McManaman, and Councillor O'Sullivan. Yes.
Yes, I just wonder, in terms of the strategic plan, is the former recreation plan getting merged into this one, or are we starting over?
You're talking about the Parks Rec MS, right? The Parks Rec and Culture Master Plan. I would say that is its own document. It doesn't all get rolled in, but some of those strategic planning documents do help to inform a community strategic plan. But that plan, right, which had its own consultation process, as you know, very much is an active document, a living document at the municipality, and we do take some guidance from it for sure. Does that answer the question well, John?
That's
Absolutely.
yeah.
Input with regards to the correctional center is also part of the strategic plan?
I think everything that the consultants here this evening and throughout the survey process and through stakeholder engagement will all be wrapped up into, right, sort of the framework within which we craft a strategic plan.
So I'll be addressing all that in just a few minutes. So, okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and members of council. Thank you for joining us. But it's really important that tonight be about the members of the community that are here and hearing from you. So it's sort of a special night that way. It's also a special night because this is only the second time I've tried to use a microphone and a mask simultaneously. We've been sort of living in Zoom meetings for a long time. What I find is it's more than usually necessary to use consonants. We had a meeting this afternoon, and it was like listening to a whole lot of people talking through their hand. So what we'll see how many more we had meant to have 30 people who were coming. So we'll maybe a little bit flexible about how we divide up the groups yet. But before I get any further into sort of the preliminaries, it's Municipality North Grenville's tradition to begin with a land acknowledgement. So let me just begin by saying the Municipality of North Grenville is committed to a meaningful truth and reconciliation process and are actively working with Indigenous residents and leaders on a community response. We respect both the land and the people of this land, including all Indigenous people who have walked in this place. So just a bit about the schedule for this evening. We have it scheduled to take about 2 hours. We found today that it took considerably longer, but perhaps that was the luxury of a meeting in the afternoon. We're going to really try hard to be done by 8:45. So that's going to require some help from all of you, and we'll plow through this as quickly as we can in a meaningful way so we hear what we need to hear from you, because that's the purpose of the meeting. It's not to get through the meeting, it's to hear what you have to say. But of course, that puts a priority on maybe trying to, as much as possible, not repeat things that have already been said for emphasis. It won't go into our reporting memo any more times the more times you say it, if you know what I mean. Like what we'll be producing out of tonight is a memorandum of the discussion that captures the ideas that have been shared. We're not taking an opinion poll tonight. So if something's been said 7 times, it does not need to be said an 8th time, and you might well think that perhaps the 2nd time might have been enough. Like we can tell the consensus of the room pretty well, and you can nod furiously, and that'll get her done, because we just don't want to be here till 10:30, because if this meeting takes as long as this afternoon's did, we'll be here till 10:30, and I don't think any of you really want that. So the purpose of the meeting is really to build on our understanding of what the folks in Municipality of North Grenville view as being the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats associated with the municipality. And I say with the municipality in 2 ways. One is you want to think about the time frame we're thinking about. And as the mayor just said, we're not just thinking about the term of council, we're probably thinking about a useful horizon of about 10 years. Why 10? Because it's more than 5 and less than 20. It's within a reasonably foreseeable period of time, but don't feel like you're constrained, oh, that's not relevant because that will be outside of this term of council. That is not a limitation on your thinking. But if it's 30 to 40 years out, it may be relevant, but it may be beyond the scope of the study. So we're sort of aiming for 10 years, just have that as a sort of a rough and ready target. The second thing is we are not only focused on stuff that is within the hardcore jurisdiction of the municipality, and you all have a copy of this document, which you may find kind of useful as a kind of scorecard, or as they say in Jeopardy, the play-at-home version. And let me just tell you what this is meant to signify. You all know that municipal jurisdiction is kind of complicated. That there's 3 different levels of of government that are directly responsible for delivering services inside your territory. You've got North Grenville itself, and this shaded area here shows all the things that North Grenville is directly involved in. You've got the provincial government, and it shows what they're involved in. And then you've got the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, and it shows what they do themselves or what they assist in. And that shows the overlapping jurisdiction. And what's really important about that is there's some stuff, that's the stuff that's up here. This is what North Grenville controls directly. And there's this stuff, this is what the province controls directly, and these are areas where it's shared. So we're interested at one level in the stuff that the town can control most directly. But that doesn't mean we're not interested in everything else. I was once the chief of staff to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing a many years ago when my hair was still short. And the truth of the matter is that I can guarantee for you that there is no file folder at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing that is labeled what municipality of North Grenville really, really needs, or what municipality of North Grenville really, really wants. And so because of that, it's really important for your council to kind of be guardians of that, whether it's in their direct ability to deliver it or not. And so we talk about a municipality delivering things. That may be because we spend or because we build. But we also talk about advocacy. We talk about convening different people to try and make things happen. That's what happens when you say get the Rotary Club together with the Parks and Rec Department to try and do something exciting. It's not something you're necessarily doing by yourself, but maybe you're making it happen through the interactions of the municipal government and others. But the point is, if it's important to you, it's important to us. And if it's relevant to the successful functioning of this place called North Grenville, then it's relevant to this process, even if it's not 100% municipal jurisdiction. And so feel free to be suggesting or commenting on things that, might be provincial jurisdiction, like for a purely theoretical example, like a jail, for example, right? Or other things that are, 100% local, like the things that you see that are up here. So don't be constrained is really the main message. So what we're going to do is, this is kind of like the last lengthy speech you're going to hear from us, because what we're going to do is immediately try and turn as quickly as we can into a discussion about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the reason why we do that is because you'll find there's a remarkable kind of clarity process that comes out of it, because without wanting to ruin any mistake or any big secrets, what you try and do is you take what you're good at, you offset what you're not so good at, you try and take advantage of the things that are positive that are coming, and you try to mitigate the threats that are coming. And if you've done all of those things, that's not a bad strategic plan. Because what else are you going to do? You're going to build on your strengths, you're going to avoid your weaknesses, mitigate them as much as possible, try and take advantage of what you can and avoid what's coming at you that's a threat, right? So what we try and do it in this disciplined way is identify these things. So the first question that we're going to kind of deal with is, what do you see as the strengths? Now, this is a little bit like live TV in two ways. One is because it's like live TV. We're actually being broadcast on the web. The second way is that we were told to expect 30 people, and I'm in the very interesting situation of, I think, having, 15, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So this means we get the much more flexible 2 groups of 8, which should be excellent news to everybody, because it's much better than 2 groups of 16. So it's a bummer that some people didn't come, but it's actually great from a point of view of helping us be more flexible. So in the spirit of being flexible, I think we will still do questions in 1 and 2 together. So we're still going to do questions 1 and 2 together, which are strengths and weaknesses. So if whoever wants to come with me into this room, we found that the acoustics in here are brutal. And so if we have 2 conversations going on simultaneously, it's really tough. So 8 of us can go into this room, and the other 8 of you can maybe group together at this one. And we'll do about 25 minutes on these first 2 questions, and then we'll come back. And Rima and I will take notes, and then we'll put them up, the way you often do. We'll sort of share with the 2 groups and validate what we heard. And then we'll move on to the second question, which I should just share with you what it is so you can see where we're heading. The labeled question 3, but now the second question is, what do you see as the key areas of opportunities and threats? And then the last question is going to be the really interesting one. And I would really urge you to have it in your mind throughout the whole conversation. It's, where are we headed? What should our future look like? Like, what are we really trying to achieve? And the question would be brutal to answer right now, but I bet it'll be a lot easier once we go through the strengths, the weaknesses, and the opportunities and the threats. But try and understand that's where we're going to be heading by the end of the conversation. Wherever we go as we get there, well, that's up to you, because if it's important to you, it's important to us. So, yep, go ahead.
Are both groups going to tackle the strength part?
Yes.
And the other part separately, not bounce back and forth?
No, we'll do the same thing identically in 2 groups, so there's no benefit to being in one or the other.
No, but I'm saying so there's consistency.
Yes, so they will be identical. The other thing is, you asked a question which I didn't get to, but I'll just answer it right now. You asked the question, how does a strategic plan fit with the other municipal plans? And this is something that you could lecture on in a university, but here is the 1-minute answer to this, and see if you can hold me to 1 minute. Okay, Katanya? The foundational document of every year's operations is the budget.
Yeah, and
The,
it's not
the
a
foundational,
giant-
that's not counting on my 1 minute here. The foundational is a budget, and that's basically what is going to tell you what we are actually funding to do this year. A transportation master plan, a Parks and Rec master plan, an official plan, those are also really important documents, and they'll often have a horizon of 10 years to 20 years, and they're focused in a particular area. A departmental operating plan, as many of you would know just from your business or whatever, that's going to be the thing that's going to actually tell the staff, take this money from the budget and do these things from the master plans. The strategic plan is the thing that tries to bind them all together in a moment in time. And ideally, the other things fit inside it in much the same way that, say, like Russian nesting dolls do. So it's not that this supersedes the other plans or makes them invalidated. It's that, like, a Parks and Rec master plan is going to go to considerable detail on Parks and Rec and might be like 100 pages long. A municipal strategic plan shouldn't be much more than 20, 25 pages for the whole shooting match and encompass everything, but encompass it at a strategic level as opposed to an operational level. So there's absolutely no inconsistency about thinking about the strategy of the place without knowing all the operational plans, because staff will fill in some of those details later. What we want to do is be catching the broad strokes. So hope that answers the question. I know I went slightly over a minute. Close. Okay. So if 8 of you want to come this way, whoever wishes, and then the other 8 can go here, and we'll start. So I got to tell you, one of the fun things about doing like different groups on the same day is it doesn't matter what you think you heard in the afternoon, you always hear something different, and which is really what makes it so worthwhile, and which I'm very happy to say to all of you, what makes your being here so worthwhile, because I've heard it all before, but I haven't heard it all before. Like, I've heard all sorts of new things tonight. So first, thank you for that. So what we'll do is I'll share some of the strengths that I heard from our group, and then maybe Rima can do the strengths, and then we'll both do the weaknesses, because I think you'll find that they kind of build on each other. I imagine something that just about everybody says all the time is the rural flavor and the other sort of assets, the Ferguson Forest, the nice size, the friendly, peaceful lifestyle, the safety, the high quality of life, the location, proximity to Ottawa, the community, occasionally I misspell things, the breadth of experiences, the participation thing showing the strength of the community, many different aspects of the lifestyle and different ways of being able to sort of live in sort of more rural, in this more rural setting. We had a really interesting conversation though about whether it's predominantly an agricultural community or predominantly a rural community, and what that means. And we'll get more into that in a minute, because that was really super interesting. Really strong services and rinks. So we heard though some interesting stuff about there's like different perspectives on whether growth is going too quickly or too slow. And it was just sort of an interesting observation that, people rushing to come up with some of the summative stuff, maybe a little bit of a foreshadow for where we're going to be going later, that whether your perception is that it's a strength that we're growing as much as we are, or if you're going to find it on the next slide as a weakness, has a lot to do with your definition of success and what it is you're trying to achieve. And that is a super important point, and frankly, why the strategic plan is so important. But like a strong sense that it does have a great rural feel, don't want to lose it. And I'll just capture this point here, because I wasn't quite sure where to put it initially, but a strength of growth in Kentville is that the agricultural community would prefer urbanization in Kentville than in certain other areas where it has better agricultural strength in terms of the land and the infrastructure that supports agriculture. So while some would say, don't want the urbanized growth here, the agricultural community would say, well, if you're going to have it somewhere, better here than in better prime agricultural land or more thriving agricultural communities. So I hope I've done justice to that. Rima, why don't you jump in with yours, and then we'll come back to some of the weaknesses.
Thank you. All right. So again, really incredible discussion with this group today. Some of the first strengths that we talked about was really that council is incredibly responsive, and that they take the time to really listen to residents. So that's something that, kind of couches the fact that we're doing the strategic plan in this way, a very consultative way. The location of North Grenville is a key strength, not only because it helps, current community members access resources outside of the municipality, but also that it helps support a balanced type of growth. So potentially, there's no need to expand the type of development that we see in the municipality as it is, because folks coming in can still access those resources in neighboring municipalities. Also, that it's close to the 416, and the U.S. can also be good for industry and potentially business attraction. Small town feel, we heard that, which is again something that is echoed in the first group. The natural environment is a strong asset, something that we need to really think about preserving, something that we really need to think about in terms of our smart development and smart growth. Heritage, so I'm going to quote someone said, there's really a feeling of intact small towns. I thought that was a really nice way to put it. Heritage is a really strong thing. There's a strong sense of pride among community members within the municipality. There's a strong and safe community, and then also that rural areas are still rural. So there's that sense of preservation that we still have access to. I'll ask, did I miss anything in terms of the strengths? Perfect. Yeah. So in terms of the weaknesses, almost, contrary to some of the strengths contrary to some of the strengths is that there's not really a strong vision for growth at this point in time. So again, better utilizing our environmental assets, but also making sure that, we're preserving them as we grow is a key thing that presently doesn't seem like is on the forefront. Tourism and sort of the promotion of our natural assets is something that is lagging behind a little bit, and something that could improve. And so that also, talks about that balanced growth. Like, how can we make sure that the environment is sustained, but we're still growing, because that is happening seemingly nonetheless. From the perspective of development in the downtown core, presently it's, more on the homogenous end, and it's dominated by big box stores. So, diversifying businesses is an area of opportunity, and also a weakness at this point. Another thing we heard is that, jobs in the municipality are not necessarily career oriented. So there's an impact there in terms of retaining folks. Volunteerism is something that is cited as both a strength and a weakness. So something that, we have a very active community, but at the same time it may be dwindling as it relates to hosting community events, and that may be contextualizing COVID, but want to make sure that we're still emphasizing that into the future as well. There was an interesting point about housing and housing development. So there are some large developments that are underway, and so the key, potential weakness here or threat is that, there's a potential that it would chip away at the small town feel, but also that it'll cause some impacts in terms of infrastructure, traffic, congestion, things of that nature. And then also, the impact of densification on that small town feel. So really thinking beyond the conventional sort of housing development opportunities. Another weakness is environmental degradation in some cases. So we see clear cutting of trees. That's something that needs to be better emphasized if we're going to do, have balanced growth. What I will add as well is that there is a lack of engagement. Again, a really key point here with young people. So knowing full well that they exist, there may be some opportunities to improve recreation centers, things of that nature, to encourage young families and also young peoples and their activities. Have I missed anything? All right. And then maybe at the end, we might have comments, yeah.
And I'll just pop this up. Hopefully, where's it going? There. So there was a couple of different clusters of commentary that we had. One was sort of around growth and infrastructure. That was not interesting. And it had to do with we've got some gaps in our infrastructure. And so on the one hand, those gaps are issues in the quality of our water servicing and wastewater servicing. But it was also, so to some degree, things that limit our ability to grow. So we've got gaps in infrastructure, but we also had the suggestion that you can link the opportunities for growth that were one of the obvious things that were mentioned as on the strength side. Hey, we've got lots of growth coming, so we can use it, and we can match the revenue opportunities from that growth with filling some of the gaps, provided that we sort of match the growth in revenue and critical mass with our gaps in our infrastructure. So there was the ability to offset a weakness with a strength. There was also the idea that we need some more growth to make the downtown area grow, and you can't do that by just throwing money at the downtown. You need to have some growth to be able to create the sustainable demand for the downtown. So again, match the weakness in the downtown's core strength with the ability to have more people who will rely upon it as their downtown. So then there was another sort of broad conversation about matters relating to mobility, the complaints about roads, them not connecting in a way that makes a lot of sense. Focus needs to be on more local connectivity. And then from a point of view of active transportation, the pathways weren't considered, like the network wasn't considered to be robust enough. And there were places where major arterial roads create barriers and, at intersection points where it kind of compromises their overall utility and safety from a point of view of how comfortable people feel using them. We also heard that there was, potential lack of services on the children's side, social side. I think you could say sort of generally as a result of upward pressure on of growth. The other thing is that there were two very different perspectives that we had a really good conversation about. And so we didn't get into some of the other things like the ECDEV and all that we might have, because we were focusing on the growth and its threat to the rural feeling versus the agricultural reality and how agricultural is a place. And I started to mention that under the strengths before. So good place to grow because you're not ruining the best agriculture land, but not if what you want to do is preserve the rural character as opposed to the agricultural character. And then there was also a notion of, well, is the growth too fast or the growth too slow? And different opinions were expressed. Too slow if what you want is to use its strength to match up to fix our infrastructure needs, and too fast if you just assume it didn't happen, and if you're worried about there being like an excessive suburbanization of a place that you thought was a rural place. And this again completes the full circle to the comment that was made. Whether this is too fast or too slow is probably one of the defining questions of the strategic planning process, because whatever pathway the municipality picks can help make, like as long as you know which one you want to achieve, you can help get there. But if you haven't picked a lane, then you shouldn't be surprised if you're in multiple lanes simultaneously, and maybe that's kind of how it feels right now. The other thing, sorry, I'll just dump out one more point and then we'll take your questions. The other thing was we kind of read into the record the grand list of concerns about the potential impacts of the prison, financial, in the sense of it being potentially kind of like a provincial download onto the municipality in terms of municipality having increased servicing and operation costs, potential impact of the thing being bigger than it was intended. So whatever you think you know now could be worse later. Potential impact on the overall flavor of the community and whether it's consistent with the strategy that you had in mind for the growth of the community. So fiscal, service, flavor, community safety, kind of, if you will, the whole enchilada. We kind of decided that we would read them into the record very quickly, make sure they got into the record, but there was a fair bit of interest in not letting that dominate the rest of the conversation, but it was all kind of read in. So we managed to cover off all of that. You guys may get to it in the threat section. We got it on the weakness section. So sorry, you had a question.
Strategic plan prior to this one, and if there was, and if you read it, did they want rural or did they want agriculture, or did they think it was too fast or did they think it was too slow? Like, what was the direction, or what was that picture before these conversations?
I think the best way to put it was it was a kind of a vague strategic plan that wasn't really clear, and I don't think it was dealing with the pace of growth and pressure. I think we all lived through the last year and a half and the kind of radical change in the real estate market that came as a result of COVID and people trying to get out of tall vertical buildings and into anywhere that had decent internet connection. And if it was 45 minutes away from downtown Ottawa, that sounds great to people from Ottawa and Toronto and just about anywhere else. So I don't know whether I would say that it really picked a lane. I don't think it did pick an obvious one. I think it was more things are moving along more or less naturally and we'll deal with them case by case, which meant you didn't have a clear compass for if you suddenly got a big burst.
You said internet, and so I can't believe we missed it. Internet should be on there. Noted.
And we'd heard that that's both a strength if you got it and a weakness if you don't. Yeah, and it depends on where you are. Yeah. Other stuff we, yep.
I want to bring back the gentleman's comments at the end of our session and whether it clearly fits in here or whether it gets captured down the road, which is the superseding question is what do you want Kentville to be as a town, as a, call it whatever you want, 10 years down the road. Do you want it to be Carton Place or, to vision.
Self-sufficient with an enormous amount of debt and to be able to fix it.
Yeah. No,
That's all good,
I-
except
I-
as has been proven, look at the growth that Kentville has had in the past 10, 15 years. And we are no further financially, we're worse off with all that development. So when people attach growth, and I only know housing, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to have all the money to manage, your dream connectivity and paths and so on and so forth. Because obviously it doesn't work that way.
But where did we start would be a good idea. Fiscally, we were in a very difficult, dire straits before the development. And if I remember correctly, verge of bankruptcy would be as close to.
So look, I think for the purposes of this group, we're a user group. We're not here to, none of us, I think, have got the 10-year fiscal plan handy. So I think where I think it comes from is there's a clear focus on the need to have whatever we do be financially sustainable. And I think that's something that everybody can agree on. And so that becomes one of the principles. And then there needs to be some satisfactory evidence that whatever we're doing by way of growth, that they usually use the expression municipally, we want growth to pay for itself. And that's what the whole system of development charges is for. And in the GTA, development charges can be as high as almost like $100,000 a unit. It can be that much to pay for the necessary infrastructure. And then of course there's an education development charge as well. In a lot of other parts of more rural Ontario where growth has been more scarce, the development charges are sometimes not as robust as they might be. And I must confess as I stand here, I can't remember which situation yours is, so I'm not going to say because it doesn't matter. The point is you need development charges that appropriately compensate the cost of growth. And that's another important principle that we could capture. But why don't we jump in to the other section unless there's any other questions? Because what we're really going to do is pick up on that question about kind of the big Uber question. What are our big opportunities and threats that we really need to be dealing with? And then I keep in the back of your mind, the one we'll do at the end is kind of the super fun one, which is, so what's most important about all this anyway? So anyway, let's keep it going. But thank you so much for your effort so far. So the fun just keeps continuing. So what our group did was, it was kind of cool because our group vacillates between glass half full and glass half empty with amazing rapidity. And so very, very interesting throughout this process, seeing how something can either be a strength point or a weakness point, or we're in great shape if we do it well, but we're totally screwed if we don't. And so and that's a lot like life, right? So there is absolutely nothing wrong with this, but it's actually great how realistic people are being. So running down this side of the page, and I got to say my color coding kind of evolved with the fluidity of the thinking, but I think it almost makes sense. We had one threat to existing services that was pointed out. One was the lack of accessibility to different folks and the need to ensure that there is accessibility of services in all the various vulnerable groups. So whether it be seniors or kids or those with accessibility issues or whatever, and just a need to make sure that we're covering off on serving who we have to serve. But there was also a concern about the sustainability of our core services at a time when public administration is getting more complicated. We have a lot of changeover in the workforce. We've got people with 40 years experience walking out the door and hoping that there's a database to replace them when they're gone around, a lot of sophisticated knowledge like location of municipal drains and things. So a concern about maintaining the sustainability of services, and there actually needs to be a bit of an action plan to be able to even count on that at a time when so much is in flux, which was a really interesting and frankly very sophisticated point that I was impressed to hear. There was the prison, which, as we've already kind of read in, we know what all the issues are with the prison, but it's a threat unless it's a benefit, and it was discussed as a potential benefit as driving some growth, but we already ran through the list of the threat side of it. The biggie still remains managing the growth that's coming and the need to balance that, how that growth can provide a way for filling in gaps in our infrastructure, that some of the lack of consensus about the growth is inevitable and stems from conflict over, public interest in what the earlier group today called the commons, saving and preserving the commons, versus private property rights. And then there was also the revenue issues around making sure that growth pays for growth and having sufficient development charges. So there was a lot there that the issue is managing growth. It's a threat if we get it wrong. It's an opportunity if we get it right. Economic development, same kind of deal. The downside of it is there are currently not enough jobs. We want to fix the downtown. The opportunity is if we achieve that. So there were a number of things that were identified. Our need for more population, need to continue to improve the downtown core, the need to find things that are authentic to us. We are not Merrickville. We will not wake up some morning with a bunch of 150-year-old stone buildings built by Scottish masons, but what can we be with North Grenville? That's the important question. And discussion about potentially a not-for-profit strategy, and another discussion that some of the things that have worked with the downtown are like authentic, small-scale, important projects, but sort of like base hits, like the library, which is an important thing. We heard also about the importance of the market and how that's quite an effective community hub. We also talked just a bit about, given many of the issues that we have that are concerns about either transit or transportation, that we may need to have a new transportation master plan to sort of address some of those issues, or at least have continued work on implementing one if we have one. Climate change was identified, both obviously for its obvious threat aspects, but also it was pointed out that in the agricultural world, it's also seen as something of an opportunity for carbon sink type activities. So it wasn't viewed as being universally bad news, but it needs to be addressed, and it creates some opportunity for green jobs and such. On agriculture, we were reminded of the threat that when people from Toronto come and move out next to farms, they're shocked to learn that slow tractors drive on the road and that sometimes we put smelly things on the fields. And so just the whole kind of culture clash of having people who don't get agriculture moving into rural areas or agricultural areas and making it harder for everybody to coexist. Kentville College was identified as both an opportunity for ag but also for economic development, and something that was kind of an underlying principle throughout the whole enchilada was being outcome and not activity based. And so not throwing money at the downtown and hoping that it thrives, but trying to have a more nuanced and more effective approach to any of the activity or investment that we do. So people were concerned not just that we do the right things, but we do them in a good and effective way that's results oriented and results based. And like, frankly, it could take a while to sort of build our skills in that and steal best practices from Merrickville or whoever's got doing it well. So lots of really good ideas, but this, you might want to start to think about, the question that I asked my gang was, if this was the work plan that was sort of driving, you know, there's maintain your base, do everything you got to do. But if this was the work plan that drove the other job jar, you know, the honey-do list of municipal government, is there something huge that's missing that we've left off here, or does this start to look like it's in the right direction?
College as a tourist.
Yeah, it was down there under Ag and under ECDev, so we got Kentville. Yeah. Other stuff? Okay, well, so just think about that, because that's, like, ultimately the strategic plan might look something like this. I'm not saying it would, but if it was based solely on the inputs of this one group and this one half hour, which it isn't, this would be starting to see what it would look like. And so, you know, we've got inputs from another 16 or 1,800 people who've participated in the survey, plus the group this afternoon, plus council, plus staff. But this is starting to look like a skeleton as opposed to, you know, a finished product. So there you go. And we're going to try and just whip this through. So we're still going to hold to trying to have you out of here by 1:45. So we're going to go as fast as we can.
Thank you. All right. So in terms of key threats, maintaining, you know, something we talked about earlier, growth and the potential loss of the small town feel, a lack of a strong reserve strategy came up, or just, you know, I would say the strategic use of the reserves that do exist. A really interesting point came up about young people, and I'm going to quote you. I didn't catch your name, but you know, you mentioned that young people are leaving the community because their values are not necessarily represented. So that's something that is a significant threat as well that we want to highlight. Essentially speaking to the lack of representation and engagement with young people. You know, a key point in terms of hosting events, festivals, things that draw in tourists and visitors is, you know, the amount of potential red tape that exists in order to get the approvals to be able to host those events. So that's a significant threat to potentially community building or further community building. Aging infrastructure. Another point that came up probably as well in the first group is, you know, the lack of social services, particularly the point about underserved communities remaining underserved. And this is LGBTQA plus community, BIPOC community, so Black, Indigenous, people of color, etc. There's also, you know, a key threat that was brought up is really being able to identify what exactly the issue is in terms of what's stopping North Grenville from, you know, becoming something similar to Merrickville, for example, aside from the heritage buildings and the, you know, those existing infrastructures. But what is it really that sort of is the key barrier that stops us from developing in that particular way? So that, you know, is identified a threat, because if you can pinpoint the problem, you can probably identify a concrete solution. In terms of opportunities, we've identified a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot more as well. But starting from the top, again, innovative housing. So how can we develop and grow in a way that is smart and environmentally sustainable, and avoiding densification so that people still have that small town appeal? Affordable housing, you know, better recreation services, supporting young families and the attraction of young families, better hospitality, supplemental accommodations, things of that nature to support tourism, broadly tourism attraction and promotion. The sort of central box here in the middle is all about employment opportunities for young people, industry attraction and business attraction, as well as potentially using the Kentville College lands to support job growth wherever that's applicable, and then also in terms of, you know, developing for the attraction of industry. Along the bottom side here, or the bottom of the page here, you know, public transportation, but I think more broadly we discuss it in terms of better connectivity and being able to have, you know, connectivity through creative ways. So whether that's publicly funded public transportation, or whether that's, for example, partnerships with service groups to support that connectivity across different areas was cited. Systems for protecting the environment that is beyond just, the preservation of environment for human use, but just for the sake of preserving our natural environment so that it is sustained. And then along sort of the bottom here is just, developing more robust and fulsome and inclusive social justice, which includes infrastructure development so that we can attract diverse communities, so that the community more broadly is more inclusive. So those are some of the key points. We talked about infrastructure for placemaking, community building, emphasizing locally sourced goods and products to diversify business. So lots of opportunities, arts and cultural hubs, but ultimately being able to develop a diverse and sort of a community that has a strong sense of vitality and vibrancy. Did I miss anything? I know we talked about a lot, but John, I know we also have some comments online, so just pass it to Hillary. I know we missed a few.
So just to share with you what's been talked about online with those watching from home, some of the strengths that they noted, same as you, great community. Community is a strength, community groups in particular, and they'd love to see the community groups work together more to create a community that cares and that plans with a long-term view. Someone noted participation, citizenship, education, open-mindedness are all stellar traits of the community. And again, a great deal of focus is on community participation, which is great. With regards to weaknesses, someone noted rapid development, particularly with regards to tree canopy, green spaces, and walkability. And the fact that people are moving from larger municipalities and assuming that this would translate to a larger ratio of participation. Someone noted that taxes are higher, garbage removal prices seem to be rising. Someone noted, which is kind of unique, that we need a revamp of the paramedic base in town. And people not recognizing the value of tree canopy and green in their urbanizing areas. And then we had one note in regards to opportunity gaps and threats, so the proposed prison and the threat that might have on taxpayers.
Thanks so much to those at home who were participating. Really appreciate it. So I think maybe for this last one, we can stay together as a group, and we're going to try and have you out of here by 1:45. So the question I wanted to ask to sort of start off this last question, and it was, what's the place, where are we heading? What should the future look like? And the existing tagline or slogan, or I think perhaps even it was the vision from the old strategic plan, was North Grenville, green and growing. So thinking about all the different things we've talked about, is that on the right track? Is that wrong? Does it somehow miss the mark? Is it, like, what do you think? And I'm really just using this as a starting point for the conversation. We're not looking to validate it so much as if you were to start with that and kick the crap out of it and say, no, it misses something. What's it missing? Or is it truly the right way to express the municipality? Anybody want to start? Sure.
Family friendly and safe.
Family friendly and safe. Other thoughts? So it's about family. So notwithstanding whether it's green or whether it's growing, it's about being family friendly and safe.
The people.
Yeah, it's about the people. Okay.
I think growth, just for the sake of growth, really doesn't get us anywhere. I mean, they do subdivisions, and financially, the town's in the same position. I mean, it's the core. It's basically attractive. You want an attractive place to live. I mean, that's rather than growth. I think concentration on growth is really doesn't pay dividends. In my view.
So we got family friendly and safe, and then an attractive place. Other thoughts? Please.
I think the fear of the prison, I realize it's kind of the hot button topic, but we got to accept that it's coming. So let's take every opportunity to make it as beneficial as we can. The infrastructure, 300 person prison, and we've got up to 10,000 people moving in behind food basics. So I mean, that's going to have 100 times bigger impact on infrastructure. So I'm not sure what people are all talking about as far as the taxpayer load from the prison. and they're going to be buying water, they're going to be paying for services the same as everybody else. And now you've generated another 400 or 500 jobs here in Kentville.
I think that development of jobs is a total scrap and a myth, and it's not the growth of what the prison may or may not bring. It's about the quality of life and how we're going to have to raise our children differently, knowing that the prison is a 3-minute walk away across the street.
But how do you have to?
Okay, so just, I don't want to turn this into a debate about the prison, so we can just try and, I think we've heard lots about where the prison might be a problem, and I think we've heard something about where it might not be, so can we sort of stay at the little bit higher level? Green and growing, what's wrong? Yeah, sure. That's another, inclusive's another good one. Other thought, and you know what? Like a strategic plan will often have values. Yeah. And so like, let me toss out some. Most of us want our governments to be efficient. You know, we would want all the proper HR values of, you know, teamwork and respectful workplace and all that stuff to be there. Most of us would want them to respect the value for money of the taxpayers. So there's all kinds of values that can appropriately go there, and inclusive, both in the way that we welcome people to the community and the way in which we serve them, totally belongs. So got a couple of comments and then I'll get to you.
Do you see anywhere in any municipality where they are not inclusive, or they have rules or barriers to not welcome people of diverse cultures and differences? Well,
it's interesting if you would say that. There is no one who is so foolish as to write we are not inclusive in our strategic plan. No, just let me finish. You asked me a fair question. There's no one who is so foolish as to write it. I think there are some places that are criticized for not being inclusive in fact because of the way they act and do their business on a day-to-day basis. And
do you have any evidence within our community that you would be able to point out?
Well, I'm here to facilitate. I'm here to facilitate, not to judge. But it never hurts to assert a positive value. Like, it's not an accusation of a weakness.
No. So, but I always feel that the term inclusive comes with, we need to take tax dollars and we need to help whoever needs to feel inclusive.
Well, what I would say is that might be a slightly idiosyncratic definition of what inclusive means.
100%. I'm not saying.
When I threw the word inclusive out, I meant that it's a reality. It is inclusive.
No, you know, it's commonly said these days that diversity is a fact and inclusion is an act, and it's the act of including people. And so, but I think the value for money value is as important as the inclusion one, and in a lot of people's minds. And in fact, we specifically discussed the value for money question in the survey, so we'll get a lot of nice answers on that one.
I think if green and growing is the slogan, it's catchy, and it really does, like, it kind of captures. But like any marketing material, it's been around for a while, so an update to it is not the end of the world. And if that's on the table, I think something that really captures, you know, it's an institutional hub, it's an educational hub. I mean, what they was to say, like, gray and growing, like, in terms of institution, but like that is a key factor of the community here, all the schools and that aspect of it.
Gray and growing is the strategic plan for my hair. You had a question.
Yeah, I just think that inclusivity is like a nice word to use, but I just don't think that that's necessarily like backed up with anything. Like, we have a pride crosswalk, but I don't know of any members of the gay community who actually asked for it. You know, like, it's a nice symbol, but I think that if we're gonna talk about inclusivity, like, basically everyone has to these days, it's a conversation that we're asked to be having. Personally, I would like to see that backed up with policy, with actual conversations with boards, like with substantial action rather than lip service to inclusivity, because I don't think that necessarily we are achieving the goals that we're setting out for ourselves on that level.
So you know, that's a hugely important point you make, because it'd be true of anything that's in the plan. And you know, when I was answering the question earlier about how this strategic plan links to budgets and action plans and all that kind of thing, what you just said underscores why that linkage is so important, because it's all just words unless it's linked to action. So thank you for adding that. Please.
One interesting thing I've noticed, everyone kind of seems to use Merrickville as a measuring stick. If you look at Merrickville, they've had no growth in the last 20 years. There's no commercial activity there. There's no, there's private retail growth, but no chains, no franchises, no anything like that. There's no housing developments. There's anything like that, but yet everyone seems to find that as the ultimate end goal. And it's just kind of interesting how Kentville's got nothing in common with Merrickville, but everyone considers that like the ultimate place.
Yeah, but so that is another that is another super good point of strategic planning. So if yours is a super good point about how things have to be linked to action, yours is the super good point that you got to figure out how you're going to measure success.
And you look at how the council there and everything has developed that. And it's not just the people here. I mean, you talk to people in Rockville and people from Ottawa all over coming to Merrickville, and they've done a beautiful job. Like a lot of us can remember 20, 30 years ago, and Merrickville was, every storefront was empty, and there were drunk people on the corner and everything else, and they completely turned it around. So I think it's that kind of vision, like in combination with groups like this and the council, that need to drive forward.
So can I try an idea on you that the group this afternoon came up with? When I said, is green and growing on the right track? They said, well, I know we're growing, but I'm not sure how green it is, kind of like your point, sir. And then somebody said, well, if we were growing green, it would be fine. like growing, green in a fashion that is green, that'd be okay. What I'm worried about is that we're growing, but it isn't green. And we may have been green, but we may not be green for much longer if we keep growing the way we're growing. And so I'm just curious, does it resonate with you that if we were to your point about updating the slogan, to say, yeah, we're going to grow, but in a green fashion, does that throw growth too much under the bus? Or does it specify the kind of growth? Or what do you think? It's just an idea, right? So,
I don't know, when you look at other municipalities or towns, there is no other town that I can think of that has vast amount of land like we have in Kentville. I mean, if you did how much room there was per capita, I would assume that Kentville would be one of the highest on the map, given the 800 acres here, the forestry land, and all the protected land by the Ministry of Natural Resources, by Conservation Authority.
mm-hmm.
No, but I'm just saying, we already have a massive amount of green space. I don't know how it could potentially hurt.
So I guess that again comes back to how you measure, please.
Growth is okay to be in the slogan. It just depends how you do growth. It's to diversify that growth and to strategically plan for that growth. But growth is good. It's not that it's bad. We need that growth. We can't just be still.
And we also heard stuff about the balance, between, and it's interesting because we had a really good conversation in our group about the balance of growth and how it relates to the agricultural community versus the rural community, which are not one and the same, and then versus suburbanization and where you get that kind of suburban growth. So does that concept trigger any?
The other thing I think we kind of have to consider too is, from all the conversations I've heard, is just on old Kentville as a whole. But you have to consider that this council is developing a strategic plan for Hexton, for Oxford Mills, South Gore, all Bishop's Mills, all the outlying areas. And I don't think, from what I've heard, I don't think we've addressed one issue for a lot of the outlying areas.
It's so limited, though.
No, but you
Yeah,
guys
there's
have
still a lot of people.
No, I understand.
There's
I understand. But limited in growth. It's because in the strategic plan, I think they have to. If you're within the hamlet, you can do building, and it's very hard to grow the hamlet, and they can take lands away from those hamlets and add them to Kentville. There's a lot of different.
The strategic plan can focus on all the other things than just grow.
No.
I think you meant the official plan.
Or the official plan. Sorry, I'm very sorry. Yeah.
One minute he's quoting Hamlet, the next minute he's quoting the official plan. Shakespeare.
So we hear lots of keywords like sustainability and density, when I view sustainability, I see sustainability as less sprawl and more density, and being able to bring infrastructure, municipal infrastructure to those dense places. And I hear many other people say we want to make sure that it's not too dense and have more dwellings or more growth per se, or sprawl. And maybe making sure we define what these things will give us a path to success, or a path to vision and success.
Well, please.
To your point that Kentville is not Merrickville, totally agree. But we also have to not lose sight of the fact there are more people who live outside of Kentville in North Grenville than live in Kentville. So we're talking all about densification and how to develop growth. But most people live outside, whether it's you're in a hamlet or in a rural setting, but there's a lot more people outside of town than there are in town. And I don't want to see those people get lost in the shuffle either.
So is it fair to say that one of the things we need to capture coming out of tonight is the strategic plan has to speak to all of MNG, not just Kentville?
Very Kentville-centric, what we've been talking about tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
I like what you're saying too, Greg, about we're always comparing ourselves to Merrickville. Like, I think we just need to compare ourselves to ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Compare ourselves to
if
what we
I'm
were
successful
a few years ago and where we want to be.
not to have Rockville or like, I think if we can set the benchmark with our targets in mind, I think that we'll achieve a better success than when we're looking all over other places.
Yeah, I think our group was on that when we were talking about we need to do things that are authentic to MNG, not try to be somebody else. That's where that authenticity point is so important.
So what do you have? What infrastructure do you have in place? We have the locks. We have there's a lot of stuff that we can utilize. The creek. But you have to start with your base, and then yes, you can look around and look at ideas and see if that some of that stuff resonates. But you have to decide where you want to go with that.
That's true. Other thoughts? So, we've heard a lot tonight. We've heard about the need to not get things wrong. We've heard about the need to get things right, and that's where that whole glass half full, glass half empty thing comes in. Heard a lot about land use planning and growth and how it's both an opportunity and a threat depending on whether we do it wrong or whether we do it right. Heard a lot about the need to make sure that we do it in a way that respects the whole transit and transportation thing, because it'll just get worse if we don't, if the growth is coming. Need to think about the financial sustainability of it, potentially use it as a tool for fueling our infrastructure needs and for getting critical mass to help bring the downtown to life without throwing money at it, just sort of feed it with people so that people grow it organically. So we've talked a lot about that. Talked a lot about, I guess, the actual kind of land use planning supports, whether it's development charges, like the things that make growth pay for growth, and the rules, and then the way we'd protect what's important about the environment, whether it's tree canopies as one example, but other things too. Talked about the need for like an environmental strategy around climate change and that sort of thing, and an economic development strategy to make sure that we're paying for the place and not just spending money, and then an underlying kind of approach to the way in which we spend the municipal money in a way that's outcomes oriented and efficient and sustainable, both from a point of view of our infrastructure and from a point of view of our services, to make sure that it's affordable and sustainable the way you'd want. Talked some about inclusion, recognizing that there's lots to say about that as a value. Had a lot of really good conversations. Is there anything, just before we wind up, is there anything that you were really hoping we were going to talk about that we didn't, that you think we sort of swung at and missed, or that slipped underneath our radar?
I just want to ask the question, are consultations being done in the other towns?
No,
this one?
No, it's mostly this one here. But
what are the next steps after this? Like, I guess you take this information and the survey, and do you generate the strategic plan for that, or do you just give advice to the council for them to generate the plan? Or
well, no, like we will put it all together into pieces, but they'll figure out what they like. So it's like they'll.
What kind of time frame is that? Like, a month?
Yeah, we're supposed to have something to them for their consideration in October.
Okay.
When they approve it, that's up to them. So if they don't like our draft, then we'll be working extra, right? So,
Okay.
so that, and the beautiful thing is your community's done such a terrific job of participating in the survey. Now, a survey is not a scientific opinion poll, right? You know how an opinion poll has a scientifically generated survey sample so that we know that it is exactly representative of the community. This is 1,900 people who've chosen to participate, so it's not scientific, but it's pretty darn persuasive when you start to get numbers that are that high. So it's certainly excellent, and there's lots of open-ended questions in it. If you haven't filled it out, would be delighted if you would. But you know, the questions ask lots of specific questions, but there's lots of open-ended stuff that means that you're not trapped to say, you know, how much do we like this, a lot or a great deal? You know, like there's lots of wide open where you can fill in. And so anybody who's watching at home, please, by all means, fill it in.
We happen to have a brainwave on the drive home.
Yeah, there's a sort of email connection there that you can fire it in, and we'll get it. So I just want to ask one more time before, because that was a good question, but it wasn't. But you answered my question with a question, which is just: is there anything else that we missed that we should have talked about tonight? Kind of going once, going twice. All right. And is there any comments at home that we no? Okay. Well, listen. So like we are people who got up at 6 o'clock this morning to drive here. We did a 4-hour session this afternoon. Oh, you got one.
There's the area we can put your comments in. Does that go forward to council as well, or just the
no,
yes?
The whole enchilada, like we'll process it all. So yes, there are, like, I think several of those open-ended boxes, and we get the pleasure of reading all 1,900 of them. So that's what we do. And yes, like what to the degree that the reason why that's such an important part of the research is we're testing. Like the research was driven out of, we did interviews with council, interviews with staff, interviews with a whole bunch of council committees, and we got the grand all-you-can-eat buffet of ideas. And then the purpose of the survey is to see what does the public think of the big all-you-can-eat buffet of ideas. But it's also to see if there's anything that isn't in the buffet that should have been. And so the open-ended things will tell us, oh, we should have had that in the, if it ain't in our questions, but it's important to the town, the open-ended stuff will find that for us. So that's why that's so important. And all I was just trying to say is, this has been a lovely day for us, because you guys have been so great participating, and like I hope you enjoyed this evening, because we certainly did, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it was great fun, and thank you, and it's great content. So, and thanks to everyone at home, and good night.